Hello, my friends, and welcome. I'm so glad you've decided to join me tonight. Before we begin, I want you to take a moment to settle in. Dim the lights, find your most comfortable chair, and leave the busyness of the world behind. While you're getting settled, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Your engagement truly helps, and the more you interact, the more these chilling tales will find their way back to your feed. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows to share a few stories that are as true as they are unsettling. So, take a deep breath, get cozy, and let's explore the dark together. Fear wears many faces, but its favorite is the one that smiles while asking questions we should never answer. Some monsters don't chase us. They wait, they learn, they follow us across decades. We're in different faces, playing games we don't know we're part of until it's too late. The deepest truths hide behind the widest smiles, waiting for us to come close enough to see what really lies beneath. Fear wears many faces, but its favorite is the one that smiles while asking questions we should never answer. Some monsters don't chase us. They wait, they learn, they follow us across decades. We're in different faces, playing games we don't know we're part of until it's too late. The deepest truths hide behind the widest smiles, waiting for us to come close enough to see what really lies beneath. I need to tell someone about this before I lose my mind completely. It's been 3 weeks since she came back, and I haven't slept properly since. Every time I close my eyes, I see that smile. That impossible, torn smile, stretching from ear to ear. But I should start at the beginning. I should tell you about the man who knew my name. I was 7 years old when it started, living in a quiet suburb outside Portland where nothing ever happened. The kind of neighborhood where people left their doors unlocked, and kids played outside until the streetlights came on. It was a rainy October afternoon. I remember because October in Portland means rain. Constant, drumming rain that turns the world gray and washes everything clean. I was playing in my room, building towers with blocks, trying to see how high I could stack them before they fell. That's when I heard someone calling my name from outside. Not shouting, not yelling, just speaking it clearly, like they were having a conversation with me through the walls. Emma, Emma. I went to the window and looked out. There was a man standing at the end of our driveway, just beyond where the streetlight would reach at night. He was wearing a long coat, dark, maybe black or navy. Even though it was pouring rain, he didn't have an umbrella. Water streamed down his face, but he was smiling. When he saw me at the window, he waved. Slow and deliberate, like we were old friends. The strange thing, the thing that made my stomach feel funny even then, was that he knew my name. Not just calling out random children's names, hoping one would stick. He was looking right at me, right at my window when he said it. Emma, come outside and play. I remember feeling confused more than scared. How did this stranger know who I was? I'd never seen him before in my life. His face was ordinary enough. Middle-aged, clean-shaven, nothing that would stand out in a crowd. But there was something about his smile that made me uneasy. It was too wide, like he was trying too hard to look friendly. My mother found me staring out the window and asked what I was looking at. When I pointed to the man, she squinted through the rain and shook her head. I don't see anyone, sweetheart. Must have been a neighbor walking by. But he was still there. Still waving, still smiling that too wide smile. I wanted to tell her he knew my name, but something stopped me. Some instinct that told me if I said it out loud, it would make it more real. This became a pattern over the next few weeks. The man would appear at random times. Always at the end of the driveway. Always in the rain. Always calling my name. Sometimes I'd see him when I got off the school bus. I'd be walking up the driveway with my backpack, and there he'd be, standing in that same spot, waiting. Sometimes he'd be there in the early morning when I looked out my bedroom window, just standing, watching, smiling. My parents never saw him. Not once. They started to think I had an imaginary friend, which frustrated me because I knew he was real. I could see him. I could hear him calling my name. Emma's going through a phase, my mother told my father one night. I heard them talking in the kitchen while I was supposed to be asleep. She'll grow out of it. But it wasn't a phase. The whispers started about a month after his first appearance. I'd be lying in bed at night, almost asleep, when I'd hear my name being called softly from outside my window. Emma. Emma, are you awake? The voice was different in the dark, raspier, like someone speaking through cloth, or from underwater. I'd pull my covers up to my chin and squeeze my eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. My heart would pound so hard I could hear it in my ears. Sometimes I'd lie there for hours, too scared to move, listening to that voice, calling and calling. One night, I made the mistake of looking. I don't know what made me do it. Curiosity, maybe. Or that terrible human need to see the thing we're afraid of, to confirm it's really there. I turned my head and looked at the window. There was a face pressed against the glass, pale in the moonlight, with long black hair that stuck to the window in wet strands. It wasn't the man from the driveway, this was a woman, and something was wrong with her mouth. Even in the dim light, I could see dark lines running from the corners of her lips up toward her ears, like someone had taken a knife and carved a permanent smile into her face. She tapped on the glass with one long fingernail. Tap, tap, tap. Then she whispered, her voice somehow carrying through the closed window. Am I pretty? I screamed so loud, my parents came running. They flicked on the lights, checked outside, looked at the window. Nothing, no woman, no wet hair on the glass, no sign anyone had been at my second-story window. You had a nightmare, honey, my father said, checking under the bed and in the closet to make me feel safe. It was just a bad dream, but I could still hear her whisper echoing in my ears, could still see those terrible scars carved into her face. The encounters stopped after that night. No more man in the driveway, no more faces at the window, no more voices calling my name in the dark. My parents were relieved when I stopped talking about my imaginary friends. Life went back to normal. I grew up, moved away for college, started a career in graphic design, got my own apartment. 20 years passed. I convinced myself it had all been childhood imagination run wild. Maybe I'd been going through a phase. Maybe it really was just bad dreams and an overactive imagination. Then, 3 weeks ago, everything changed. I was visiting my parents for the first time in months. My old bedroom was exactly as I'd left it. Band posters on the walls, books on the shelves, the same blue curtains I'd picked out when I was 12. It felt nostalgic sleeping there, comforting, safe. Until 3 a.m., the familiar sound woke me from a deep sleep. Tap, 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 tap. My blood turned to ice. My body went rigid under the covers. It couldn't be happening again. It couldn't. I forced myself to look at the window. She was there. Exactly as I remembered her. Long black hair, plastered against the window. Pale face pressed to the glass. And those scars. Those terrible, gaping scars running from the corners of her mouth to her ears, creating a grotesque, permanent smile. Her real mouth moved behind the wounds, forming words I couldn't hear through the glass. But I knew who she was now. I'd learned about her in college while researching Japanese urban legends for a folklore class. The Kuchisake Onna, the slit-mouthed woman. She asks victims, if they think she's pretty. There's no right answer. Say yes, and she reveals her mutilated face before killing you with scissors. Say no, and she kills you immediately, for the insult. The only way to escape is to give her an unexpected answer. Something that confuses her long enough for you to run. But this wasn't just any Kuchisaka Anna. As I stared at her through the window, recognition dawned like a cold sunrise. The eyes were the same, the shape of the face beneath the mutilation, the way she tilted her head. This was the man, from the driveway. He had been her all along, wearing a different face, playing a longer game than I could have imagined. 20 years of patience, waiting for me to come back. She tapped again, more insistent. Then she spoke, and her voice carried through the glass, as if it wasn't there at all. Emma, don't you remember me? I've been waiting so long to finish our conversation. My hands shook as I reached for my phone on the nightstand. But who could I call? My parents hadn't seen her before. They wouldn't see her now. This was between her and me. A twisted reunion, 20 years in the making. Open the window, Emma, she whispered. Let me ask you my question. I shook my head, pressing myself against the far wall. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. She just smiled wider, those terrible gashes stretching impossibly. You can't hide forever. I'm very patient. I waited 20 years. I can wait longer. Every night since then she returns. Sometimes she's the man in the driveway again, standing in the rain, waving with that too friendly smile. Sometimes she's at the window, tapping with those long nails, her split face a nightmare made real. She asks different questions now. Don't you want to know why I chose you? Aren't you curious what would have happened if you'd come outside that day? Don't you think we were meant to be friends? I've tried everything. Salt lines across the windows and doors. Protective charms I ordered online. I've stayed at friends' apartments, at hotels, even slept in my car in a 24-hour parking garage. But she always finds me. She's not bound by the usual rules. She's something older, something that learned to wear faces like masks, to play with her food across decades. Last night, she finally asked the question I'd been dreading. I was back in my own apartment. It had been quiet for 3 days, and I'd started to hope. Maybe she'd moved on, found someone else to torment. But at 3 a.m. the tapping started. I looked at the window of my 5th-floor apartment. She was there, floating outside somehow, her hair drifting around her face like she was underwater. Am I pretty? She asked. I was ready. I'd practiced my answer 100 times, rehearsed it in my head. The one that might confuse her enough to let me escape. I looked her straight in those familiar stranger's eyes and said, You're average. She tilted her head, the gashes in her cheeks gaping as she processed this unexpected response. For a moment, just a moment, I thought it had worked. Then she laughed. A sound like glass breaking underwater, like wind through a tunnel, like something that should never make sound, suddenly finding its voice. Clever girl, she said, but I've been waiting too long to let you go that easily. I'll ask again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Eventually you'll give me the answer I want. Eventually you'll make a mistake. She vanished then, leaving only wet handprints on the window that dried slowly, unnaturally, like they were made of something more than water. I haven't seen her since last night, but I know she's out there waiting. Maybe she's standing at the end of someone else's driveway right now, learning a new name, starting a new game, with some other 7-year-old who doesn't understand why a stranger knows who they are. Or maybe she's closer than I think, wearing another face I haven't learned to recognize yet, standing behind me in line at the coffee shop, sitting across from me on the subway, waiting for the perfect moment to ask her question one more time. I don't know if sharing this story will help anyone. Maybe it will only spread her influence, give her more names to call, more children to visit in the rain. But I had to tell someone. I had to make someone else understand. The strangers who know our names aren't always human. Sometimes there's something else. Something patient and hungry and impossibly old, wearing smiles that stretch too wide and faces that don't belong to them. If you see someone standing in your driveway in the rain, someone who knows your name but shouldn't, don't engage. Don't look for them at night. Don't answer when they call. And whatever you do, if a woman with black hair and a split smile asks if you think she's pretty, remember that there are no right answers. There are only delays. I'm still waiting for her to come back. I know she will. She always does. In the meantime, I practice my answers and try not to think about that rainy day 20 years ago. Try not to wonder what would have happened if I'd opened the door. If I'd walked down that driveway to meet the stranger who knew my name. Maybe I'm about to find out, because I can hear tapping at my window right now, and I know if I look, she'll be there, waiting to ask her question one more time. We think we are safe because we keep our heads down. We think we are safe because we mind our business. We think we are safe because we do not get involved. But indifference is a contagion, and eventually it consumes everything. It even consumes the ones who thought they were immune. The echo men do not hunt the cruel. They do not target the violent. They find the silent. They find the ones who hear suffering and do nothing. And they make sure those people finally understand what it feels like to be unheard. If you ever walk down a dark street and you hear someone calling for help, you must answer. Even if the cry is just your imagination. Even if the cry seems like nothing. Because the alternative is too terrible. The price of silence is too high. The price of silence is becoming one of the voices that echo forever. Unheard. Unseen. Forgotten. Until someone finally listens. Comment below your valuable thoughts now. Let's read today's story. The call log showed 7 unanswered calls to emergency services, all placed within the same minute. By the time someone finally opened their window to look outside, Linda's voice had already gone quiet. Linda walked the same route home every evening at 6:15 in the afternoon. She traveled down Maple Street, past the corner shop with the flickering neon sign, then turned left onto Thornwood Avenue, where the streetlights always seemed dimmer than they should be. The journey took 23 minutes door to door. She had time to walk carefully. Timing things made her feel safe. It made her feel predictable. It gave her a sense of control. Linda was 26 years old. She worked as a pharmacy technician. She lived alone in a ground-floor flat that she could barely afford. Her parents had moved back to Leeds 2 years ago, leaving her in this quiet suburb of Manchester where she knew no one. In Manchester, no one knew her either. On that particular November evening, fog rolled in early. The fog was thick and gray. It muffled sound and made the familiar streets feel foreign. She pulled her coat tighter around her body as she turned onto Thornwood Avenue. The street was empty. It was always empty at this hour. Families were eating dinner behind closed doors. Curtains were drawn against the cold. She was halfway down the block when she heard the footsteps. The footsteps were not in front of her. They were behind her. They were steady and deliberate. They were matching her pace. She told herself that the footsteps meant nothing. They belonged to just another person walking home. This was a residential street. People lived on Thornwood Avenue. But when she slowed her pace, the footsteps slowed as well. When she sped up, they sped up too. Her heart began hammering in her chest. She fumbled for her phone, pulling the device from her pocket without stopping. The screen's glow felt like a beacon in the fog. She dialed emergency services. The call connected. The phone rang once. It rang twice. Emergency services? Which service do you require? I need the police, she said, and her voice was tight with fear. I'm being followed. I'm on Thornwood Avenue, walking toward. The operator's voice distorted into crackling static. Then she heard a whisper underneath the static. The whisper repeated her own words back to her. I am being followed. She heard her own words echoing back to her. Hello? She said into the phone. She pressed the phone harder against her ear. Can you hear me? She asked the operator. More static filled the line. Then the whisper came again, clearer this time. It said, Can you hear me? The whisper used her voice. It used her exact intonation. The footsteps behind her grew closer. She ran. She was not thinking anymore. She was just moving. Her feet pounded on wet pavement. Her bag bounced against her hip. Her breath came in gasps. Her flat was 3 blocks away. If she could just get inside and lock the door, she would be safe. The footsteps ran too. They were faster now. They were closer now. She glanced back through the fog. She saw a figure. The figure was tall. It wore dark clothing. It had a hood pulled up. Its face was hidden in shadow. But the way the figure moved seemed wrong to her. It moved too fluidly. It moved too fast. She burst through the gate of her building. She fumbled with her keys at the entrance. The lock stuck. It always stuck. And she whispered urgently, Come on, come on. The lock clicked. She threw herself inside the building. She slammed the door behind her. Her hands shook as she engaged the deadbolt. Then she engaged the chain. Then she pressed her back against the cold wood. She focused on breathing. She focused on just breathing. Her phone was still in her hand. It was still connected to the emergency call. But the only sound coming through the phone was static, and underneath it, she heard breathing. The breathing was labored and wet. It was not her breathing. It belonged to someone else. She hung up the call. That night, she did not sleep. She sat on her sofa with every light on. She stared at the door. She stared at the windows. She stared at the shadows that moved when nothing should be moving. At 2:37 in the morning, she saw something. She saw a shadow under her door, visible in the gap between the wood and the floor. The shadow showed 2 feet. The 2 feet were standing motionless. Someone was outside her flat. Someone was in the hallway. Someone was just standing outside her door. She grabbed her phone. She dialed emergency services again. Emergency services. Which service do you require? There is someone outside my door, she whispered. I am at flat 3, 18 Thornwood Avenue. Please send someone. Please send help. Can you describe the person? The operator asked. I can see the person's shadow under the door. The person has been standing there for several minutes. Please, I need help. I need someone to come now. The operator's voice distorted again. It crackled into that familiar whisper. The whisper said, Please, I need help. I need someone to come now. The whisper was using her voice. She hung up. Tears were streaming down her face. She went to her bedroom window. The window overlooked the street. Perhaps she could signal for help. Perhaps she could wave to a passing car. Perhaps she could do something. But the street was empty. It had no cars. It had no people. It had only fog. The fog was thick as cotton wool. And when she turned back to her door, the shadow was gone. Morning brought her no relief. She called the police station directly. She explained what had happened to her. She explained the following. She explained the shadow. She explained the strange calls. The officer on the phone sounded bored. Did you see the person's face? He asked. No. But the person stood outside my door. Did the person try to break in? He interrupted. No. The person just stood there. Miss, without a clear description or attempted entry, there is not much we can do. The person could have been a neighbor. The person could have been someone visiting the wrong flat. For hours, she protested. The person stood there for hours. The officer paused. I will file a report. We will increase patrols in your area. The police never increased patrols. She started noticing things about her neighbors. The few neighbors she had seen in passing now looked through her. They did not look at her. They looked through her as if she was not there. The security cameras in the building's entrance hall would glitch whenever she walked past. The screen would flicker. The image would distort. Her emergency calls never quite connected anymore. Every call produced only static. Every call produced only her own voice whispering back. On the third night, the shadow returned. 2 feet appeared under the door. They were standing. They were waiting. This time, she went to her neighbor's flat. Her neighbor was Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen was elderly. She always smiled when she and Linda passed in the hallway. Linda knocked on Mrs. Chen's door. She knocked softly at first. Then she knocked louder. Mrs. Chen? Please, I need help. There is someone outside my door. Can you call the police? Mrs. Chen gave no answer. She knocked harder. Please! I know you are home. I can see your light on. Through the peephole, she saw movement. She saw a shadow passing behind the door. Then the light went off. She stood in the darkened hallway. She was alone. The shadow under her door had not moved. She researched the building that night. She sat on her sofa with her laptop open and every light blazing. She searched for information about Thornwood Avenue, number 18. The building was old. It was built in 1897. Originally, it was a workhouse. It became apartments in the 1960s. But there was something else she discovered. She found a local history forum. She found a thread from 5 years ago. The thread asked, "Does anyone remember what happened on Thornwood? The Echo Men legend?" Her blood went cold. She clicked the thread. The story was fragmented. It was scattered across different posts. But the pieces came together in her mind. 1853. A young woman named Mary Brennan. She was an Irish immigrant. She was attacked on Thornwood Street. She was beaten. She was left dying. She called for help. She screamed. She begged. The houses on either side of her had curtains drawn. They had lights off. They had doors locked. No one came to help Mary Brennan. She died in the street. She died alone. She died unheard. According to the legend, Mary Brennan's cries never stopped. The cries echoed. They multiplied. They became something else. They became the Echo Men. The Echo Men were spirits born from ignored suffering. They were manifestations of every unanswered plea. They represented every turned back. They represented every closed door. The Echo Men walked the streets where help was denied. They were searching. They were always searching. They were searching for someone to hear them. They were searching for someone to answer. And if you ignored their call, if you refused to help, they would make you understand. They would make you feel what it is like to scream into the void. The shadow came back every night. She stopped calling for help. What was the point? The police did not come. The neighbors did not answer. Her calls echoed back with only her own desperation. She was alone. She was completely alone. She was utterly alone. On the 7th night she heard knocking. The knocking was soft and rhythmic. It was against her door. Tap, tap, tap. She sat frozen on her sofa. She was staring at the door. The knocking continued. It was patient. It was endless. Then she heard a voice. It was muffled through the wood. It said, "Please." Her breath caught. It said, "Please. Someone help me." The voice was her voice. It had her exact intonation. It was pleading. It was desperate. She stood. She walked toward the door. She walked against every instinct. "Who are you?" she whispered. Silence. Then the voice said, "I am still here." Those words were spoken in her voice. But she had not spoken those words. Her hand reached for the deadbolt. She did not know why her hand was moving. She could not stop herself. "Do not open the door," she whispered to herself. "Do not open." But her hand moved anyway. It was sliding the bolt. It was unhooking the chain. She pulled the door open. The hallway was empty. It had only dim lighting. It had only worn carpet. It had only the smell of damp and old heating. No one was there. She exhaled. Relief was flooding through her. She started to close the door. That is when she saw the reflection. In the mirror at the end of the hallway, she saw her reflection. But standing behind her reflection was a figure. The figure was tall. It was dark. It had a hood pulled up. Its face was obscured. She spun around. Nothing was there. She looked back at the mirror. The figure remained. It was right behind her reflection. It was closer now. It whispered, "Please, someone help me." The whisper was using her voice. The figure had her face beneath that hood. The face was pale. It was desperate. It was terrified. The figure was her. She tried to scream, but no sound came out of her mouth. She stumbled backward into her flat. The figure in the mirror followed. It was matching her movements exactly. She grabbed her phone. She dialed emergency services with shaking fingers. "Emergency services, which service do you require?" "Help me," she choked out. "Please, something is wrong. I need help right now. I need..." The operator's voice distorted. But this time, the voice echoing back was not her voice. The echo was dozens of voices. It was hundreds of voices. It was a chorus of desperate pleas layered over each other. "Help me. Please. Someone. Anyone. I am begging you. Do not ignore me. Please, do not ignore me. Help. Help. Help." The voices were every unanswered call. They were every ignored cry. They were every person who screamed into the void while the world turned away. All of them were speaking at once. And in the mirror, her reflection's mouth moved. It was speaking words she had not said. "I called for help. No one came. Now I am one of them. One of the unheard. One of the ignored. One of the forgotten." She dropped the phone. "No," she whispered. "This is not real. This is a mental breakdown. Just stress. Just exhaustion. Just..." Her reflection smiled. The smile was sad. It was pitying. That is what Mary thought too. What all of them thought. Until they understood. "Understood what?" she asked. "That silence kills, just as surely as violence. That indifference is a weapon. That when you ignore someone's suffering, you create something that never stops suffering." The lights in her flat began to flicker. "I am not ignoring anyone," she said, backing away from the mirror. "I have called for help. I have tried. No one will listen to me." "Exactly," the reflection said. The word hung in the air. It was heavy. It was final. "Now you understand what it is like. To be unheard. To be unseen. To be unprotected. Now you know what Mary felt. What all of them felt. The immigrants. The outsiders. The ones who do not quite belong. The ones people pretend not to see." Her back hit the wall. "What do you want from me?" Her reflection tilted its head. "Nothing. You have already given it. You have felt what it is like. That is all the Echo Men need. To be felt. To be known. To not be ignored anymore. The lights went out. They found her flat empty the next morning. Mrs. Chen had finally called the police. She complained about strange noises. She complained about a phone ringing constantly. The phone never stopped ringing. Officers entered flat 3. The door was unlocked. The lights were on. No sign of Linda remained. There was no struggle. There was no note. Just her phone on the floor. It was still ringing. When the officers answered the phone, all they heard was breathing. And underneath the breathing, they heard a whisper. It said, "I am still here." The case was classified as a missing person investigation. Then, after 6 months, it was closed. Misadventure, the report said. She possibly left the area voluntarily. Her family disagreed. But what could they do? There was no evidence. There were no witnesses. There was no body. She was just another person who disappeared. She was another voice that went unheard. But sometimes late at night, residents of Thornwood Avenue report strange calls. Their phones ring at 2 in the morning. They ring at 3 in the morning. They ring at 4 in the morning. When the residents answer, they hear silence. Then they hear breathing. Then they hear a whisper asking for help. The whispers come in different voices. They come in dozens of different voices. Some voices are recent. Some voices are old. Some voices speak in languages long forgotten. All of the voices were ignored. All of them went unheard. All of them are still waiting for someone to answer. The recording of Linda's last call circulated online for a while, before it was taken down. People debated its authenticity. They called it fake. They called it creepypasta. They called it performance art. But those who listened to the whole recording, all 7 minutes of it, heard something the skeptics missed. In the background of the recording, underneath her pleading voice, underneath the static and distortion, people heard other voices. The other voices were whispering. They were overlapping. They said, "Please help me." They said, "No one is listening." They said, "I am still here." And if you listen very carefully to the recording, at the very end of it, you can hear footsteps. The footsteps are not running away. They are walking closer. They are always walking closer, until the recording cuts off. Fear does not always wear a monster's face. Sometimes, it wears the face of closed curtains. Sometimes, it wears the face of locked doors. Sometimes it wears the face of eyes that look away. Some horrors are not born from violence. Some horrors are born from the silence that follows violence. Some horrors are born from the moment someone screams for help, and the world pretends not to hear. Fear isn't just about what chases you in the dark. Sometimes fear is about the places that wait, that watch, that remember every sin, ground into their soil, and demand payment from anyone foolish enough to disturb their slow dissolution. Now, let me share and read this traumatized story. And if you like this, don't forget to subscribe and share your valuable comments. I need to tell you about Millhaven before someone else makes the same mistake I did. Before someone else drives out there with a camera and stupid dreams about capturing decay through a lens. Before someone else ignores every warning sign and walks into a town that's been feeding on its own rot for 40 years. I'm a photographer. Urban exploration stuff. Mostly abandoned hospitals, forgotten amusement parks, places where time stopped and nature started taking back what we built. I've been doing it for 3 years without incident. I thought I understood abandoned places. Thought I knew how to read the signs of danger, structural collapse, toxic mold, Squatters who didn't want company. I didn't know shit. I found Millhaven last October through a forum called deadtowns.net, buried deep in a thread about forgotten lumber towns in the Pacific Northwest. The photos caught my attention first. Streets where the asphalt bubbled up like blisters, houses with walls peeled back like skin, and that massive sawmill squatting at the edge of town like something cancerous. One poster, username is Sawdust Ghost, claimed the whole place was cursed, said the mill had poisoned the river back in the 70s, and the lawsuits bled the town dry. Another user, Timberwolf42nd, said, buildings there collapsed in perfect sequence, one each season, like the town was eating itself from the inside out. Most people called bullshit. I should have listened to them. Instead, I loaded my camera bag, filled up my gas tank, and drove north on a Saturday morning in late October. The weather was perfect. Cool, overcast, that gray autumn light that makes everything look haunted even when it's not. The drive took 4 hours. Highway turned to state route. State route turned to county road. County road turned to gravel, then dirt, then something that barely qualified as a path. Tree branches scraped my car on both sides. More than once I thought about turning back. I should have. When I finally parked at what used to be Main Street, the silence hit me, like a physical thing. Not peaceful quiet, the kind that makes your ears ring, like the world was holding its breath, waiting. I got out of my car and just stood there for a minute taking it in. The smell hit me first, not just rot or mildew, something chemical underneath, like old industrial oil mixed with sawdust that had been fermenting for decades. It coated the back of my throat, made me want to gag. A crow sat on a collapsed storefront, about 20 feet away, just sitting there, watching me with one black eye. I raised my camera to get a shot of it against the ruins. The crow didn't fly away. It just tilted its head, like it was waiting for something. The main street stretched, maybe 3 blocks before disappearing into forest that had started reclaiming everything. Half the buildings had already surrendered, roofs caved in, walls leaning at impossible angles. But the other half stood perfectly intact. Windows dark, doors hanging open like mouths. I started with the general store. The sign was still readable despite 40 years of weather. Henderson's Goods, EST 1952. Inside, everything was wrong. Not ransacked or looted, arranged. Cans lined the shelves in neat rows, their labels black with mold. The cash register drawer hung open, still full of bills so degraded they looked like ash. A calendar on the wall showed July 1978, the last month the store had been open. But the floor, Jesus, the floor was covered in fresh sawdust. Not old, settled dust, fresh, like someone had just finished sweeping it there. I could smell pine, could see the texture of individual wood shavings. I heard the footsteps above me before my brain registered what they were. Slow, deliberate, moving from one end of the building to the other. The ceiling groaned with each step, raining more sawdust down on my head. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded wrong in that space. Too loud and too quiet at the same time. "Is someone up there?" The footsteps stopped, directly overhead. Then nothing. Just that suffocating silence pressing in again. The smart thing would have been to leave. Get back in my car and drive the hell out of there. But I'd driven 4 hours for this. I needed the shots. Needed content for my portfolio, so I did the stupid thing. I climbed the stairs at the back of the store. Each step screamed under my weight. The wood felt soft, rotten, like it might give way any second. I kept one hand on the railing, which was probably even less stable, and climbed slowly toward the second floor. The door at the top was open. I stepped through into one long room that must have been storage once. Empty now. Nothing but more sawdust. piled in corners, drifted against walls like snow, no footprints. No sign anyone had been there in decades. But the air felt occupied, like walking into a room where people just stopped talking. I took photos mechanically, trying to document what I was seeing. But my hands shook so bad most came out blurred. Through the viewfinder, I caught something in the corner, a shadow that didn't match anything in the room. I lowered the camera. The shadow was gone. I looked through the lens again. There it was. Human-shaped but wrong. Too tall, joints bending in directions that made my stomach turn. The temperature dropped. I'm not exaggerating. It dropped at least 20 degrees in seconds. My breath came out in clouds. Frost spread across the windows like reaching fingers. The shadow in my viewfinder moved, sliding along the wall, coming toward me. I stumbled backward, hit the stairs, didn't even try to take them carefully, just crashed down them, half falling, half running, burst out into the street where the October sun felt like a lie against my skin. I stood there gasping, heart hammering, telling myself it was nothing. Old buildings play tricks. Shadows and light and an overactive imagination. But I didn't believe it. I should have left then. Should have gotten in my car and never looked back. But I'd come for the mill. The sawmill was the centerpiece, the reason Millhaven existed. I had to see it. God help me, I had to see it. The mill squatted at the town's edge like a cancer, massive and dark against the tree line. Half the structure had already collapsed, leaving twisted metal and rotted beams reaching up like broken fingers. The part still standing looked ready to fall at any moment, walls bulging outward, roof sagging in the middle. A sign by the entrance read Millhaven Lumber, safety first in letters almost too faded to read. The smell hit harder here, that chemical sawdust stench so thick I could taste it. The ground around the mill was bare dirt, nothing growing, not even weeds. Scattered across it were what looked like white stones. I bent to examine one and nearly vomited. Not stones, bones, small animals, birds, rodents, maybe cats, all arranged in perfect circles around the building's foundation. Like offerings, like sacrifices. I should have run, should have understood what I was looking at. But I was still thinking like a rational person, still trying to explain it away. I went inside. The machinery loomed in the darkness like sleeping giants. Massive saw blades hung from chains, rust making them look like they'd been dipped in dried blood. Conveyor belts stretched into shadows, and everywhere, that fresh sawdust smell. Impossible after 40 years of abandonment. I followed the main walkway deeper into the building. My footsteps echoed wrong. Too many echoes, like multiple people walking. In what must have been the main cutting floor, I found the files. Dozens of boxes, papers spilling out, all documenting the lawsuits. Photos of dead fish floating in sawdust-choked water. Medical records of workers with lungs full of wood fiber. Environmental reports showing toxin levels that made my skin crawl. And contracts, so many contracts, all signed by town officials. All authorizing the mill to dump wherever they wanted in exchange for keeping Millhaven employed. A grinding sound made me look up. One of the saw blades was moving, just slightly, swaying on its chain. Then another, then all of them, creating a symphony of metal on metal that sounded almost like voices. Whispering, accusing. The conveyor belts shuddered to life, moving without power, carrying nothing but shadows and sawdust. I ran, but the mill didn't want to let me go. Doors I'd passed through minutes before were now blocked by fallen beams. Hallways stretched longer than they should. The whispers grew louder, and I could almost make out words. Names, maybe. Or please. The sawdust in the air thickened until breathing felt like drowning. My lungs burned, My eyes streamed tears that came away pink with blood. I found a window, punched through it with my camera bag, tumbled out onto the dead ground outside. Behind me, the mill groaned like a living thing. And I swear I saw faces in the broken windows. Dozens of them pressed against the glass, mouths open in silent screams. The building shuddered. Part of the remaining roof collapsed inward with a sound like breaking bones. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was the town itself as I ran back to my car. Every building I passed was different than before. Doors that had hung open were now closed. Windows that were broken now showed intact glass with shadows moving behind them. The general store I'd explored, it was gone, not collapsed. Just gone, leaving a square of that horrible sawdust where it had stood. My car wouldn't start. Of course it wouldn't. I sat there turning the key again and again, while the sun dropped toward the horizon and shadows grew longer. Through the windshield, I watched Millhaven change. Buildings shifted positions when I wasn't looking directly at them. Streets rearranged themselves. And always, that feeling of being watched by something that had been waiting 40 years for fresh meat. The engine finally caught just as full darkness fell. I drove out of there so fast I nearly crashed 3 times on that excuse for a road. In my rearview mirror, I saw lights flickering on in the abandoned buildings, one by one, like the town was waking up, or maybe saying goodbye, or hello. I made it home, obviously, or I wouldn't be telling you this. But I brought something back with me, sawdust in my clothes that won't wash out, no matter how many times I've tried. Photos on my camera that show things I didn't see. Faces in windows, figures in doorways, and in one shot, a clear image of the mill's interior with all the machinery running and workers who've been dead for decades manning their stations. And dreams, God, the dreams. Every night I'm back in that mill. The saws are singing. The conveyor belts are carrying pieces of the town itself into the grinding machinery. And I'm walking those shifting streets, breathing in that poisoned air, listening to something call my name. I researched more when I got back. Found out the lawsuits weren't just about environmental damage. Workers had been going missing for years before the mill closed. The official story was they quit, moved away, looking for better jobs. But there were rumors, accidents that weren't reported. Men who fell into the machinery and were never found. How the sawdust from those shifts had a different color, a different smell. The town didn't die when the mill closed in 1978. It started dying, and it's been dying ever since. Pulling down one building each season like a sacrifice, like payment for sins that can never be washed clean. Sawdust Ghost was right. Millhaven is eating itself. But it's not just eating itself. It's hungry for more. I still have sawdust in my lungs. I cough it up sometimes, fresh and pine-scented and impossible. My doctor says there's scarring, chemical damage that shouldn't be there from one day of exposure. But I know what it really is. It's Millhaven's way of marking me, of making sure I remember, of maybe calling me back. Because here's what I understood in that mill, surrounded by those grinding whispers. The town isn't abandoned. It's waiting. Every collapsed building is a mouth. Every empty window is an eye. And the mill is its heart, still beating, still hungry, still grinding away at reality itself. Don't go looking for Millhaven. Don't follow old roads to dying towns. Don't trust photos on urban exploration forums. Some places don't want to be found. And some places, once they notice you, never really let you leave. I escaped with my body, but part of me is still there, walking those shifting streets, breathing in that poisoned air, listening to the mill sing its song of sawdust and secrets. The town that wouldn't die is still out there, still collapsing, still consuming. And if you're very quiet on certain nights, if you hold your breath and listen past the normal sounds of the world, you can hear it calling. Calling for visitors, calling for witnesses, calling for more souls to grind down into sawdust and shadows. Some towns die clean, fading into history and memory. But others learn to feed on their own decay, to transform their death into something hungry and patient and eternal. Millhaven isn't a ghost town. It's a mouth full of broken teeth, and it's learned to chew with what it has left. When the lawyer told me I'd inherited my grandmother's estate, I should have asked why no one in my family would talk about her, why my mother went pale when she heard the name Ilara, why the property had sat empty for 15 years even though it was worth a fortune. But I was broke, desperate, and stupid. So I drove out there alone, and I learned exactly why some inheritances come with a price that money can't measure. If a relative you've never met leaves you property, and your family begs you not to go, listen to them. Because some houses don't want new owners. They want sacrifices. My life was a symphony of final notices. The eviction letter was tacked to my apartment door, its red ink screaming at me like an accusation. Medical bills for my mother's last hospital stay covered my kitchen counter. Thousands of dollars I didn't have. Student loan companies had stopped being polite in their messages. I was working 2 jobs, waitressing during the day, stocking shelves at night, and still sinking. The water was rising past my chin. So, when a letter arrived from an attorney I'd never heard of, a man named Gerald Whitmore from some tiny mountain town called Ashford, it felt like divine intervention. Dear Miss Sarah Blackwood, it read, I am writing to inform you that you are the sole heir to the estate of Ilara Blackwood, deceased. The property consists of a 2-story farmhouse and 143 acres of forested land. 143 acres. I did the math in my head, even in the middle of nowhere. That had to be worth at least $500,000, maybe more. It was my ticket out. My mother had only mentioned her own mother a handful of times before she got sick, always in hushed, fearful tones. A dark woman who lived in the mountains and practiced old ways. That was all I knew. It had been enough for my mother to cut her out of our lives completely. When I told my mother about the inheritance, the color drained from her face. Don't go, she whispered from her hospital bed. Her hands, thin and trembling, gripped mine with surprising strength. Sarah, please. That land, that house, it's not safe. Mom, we need the money. You need the money. I can sell it. No, her voice cracked. Some things are worth more than money. Some debts can't be paid with cash. I thought she was confused, the medication making her paranoid. I was wrong about so many things. The drive took 7 hours. The last 2 unwinding mountain roads, where cell service vanished, and the trees crowded in so thick, their branches formed a perpetual twilight overhead. My GPS stopped working after the first hour. I had to follow hand-drawn directions the lawyer had mailed me. The house appeared suddenly, like it had been waiting behind a curtain and decided to reveal itself. It sat like a rotting tooth in the forest's mouth. White paint peeling like dead skin. Windows dark despite the afternoon sun. But it was huge. 2 full stories with a wraparound porch and outbuildings scattered across the property. It was beautiful in a haunted, forgotten way. I stopped for gas at the only station for 50 miles. A rust-streaked pump attached to a dingy general store, that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. The old man behind the counter eyed my license plate. Out of state. "You're not from around here," he said. "Not a question. Just came in some property," I said, handing him cash. "The old Blackwood place." His smile vanished. He took my money without meeting my eyes, counted it slowly. "Folks around here don't go up that way." He paused, his gaze finally meeting mine. His eyes were watery and sad, especially after sundown. "That land's got a bad history. Some places are best left alone." "What kind of history?" He shook his head. "The kind that doesn't bear repeating." "You be careful up there, miss." I ignored the warning. I had to. I needed this. The moment I stepped onto the porch, a profound stillness fell. Not peace. A complete absence of life. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed to avoid this place. The air was cold and heavy, pressing in on me like invisible hands. I unlocked the front door with the key the lawyer had sent. It swung open with a groan that sounded almost human. Inside, the house was a time capsule of dust and secrets. Every mirror was either covered with thick black cloth or turned to face the wall. Strange symbols, spirals and jagged lines that hurt to look at it, were carved into every door frame and windowsill. The furniture was old but well made. Expensive. Everything was arranged perfectly, like someone had just stepped out and planned to return any moment. But the dust told a different story. 15 years of it. In a locked study on the second floor, I found her belongings. Boxes of strange, pungent powders that made my nose burn. Bundles of dried herbs I didn't recognize. Jars of things floating in murky liquid that I didn't want to examine too closely. And a collection of leather-bound journals. Dozens of them stacked on a massive oak desk. I opened the first one. My grandmother's elegant script filled the page, and the air in the room grew colder. September 3rd, 1978. The binding held through the autumn equinox. The offerings were accepted. The land is quiet for now. I flipped ahead, scanning entries at random. The old families understood. You must feed the land what it hungers for, or it will take what it wants. "Marcus came by today," said his cattle are dying. 3 calves born deformed. I told him to move his herd to the eastern pasture. Some soil is too rich. Some ground remembers. I am growing old. The work is becoming difficult. I must prepare for what comes after. The first few nights I convinced myself the house's quirks were just age and isolation. I was wrong. It started small. A bottle of cleaning spray I'd left on the kitchen counter. Suddenly on the floor the next morning, shattered. I blamed a draft, even though the windows were closed. Then came the footsteps, precise and heavy, on the roof at exactly 3 a.m. every single night. I told myself it was an animal. Raccoons, maybe, or branches from the trees. But branches don't walk with measured, deliberate steps. On the 3rd morning I found a trail of damp, black soil and dead leaves, leading from the basement door, up the main staircase, ending at the attic entrance. The basement door had been locked from the outside. I was the only one with a key. I'd swept those stairs clean the day before. Panic began to prickle at the edges of my desperate optimism. That's when I found the first note, tucked inside a kitchen cabinet, written on a faded receipt in thick black marker. "Don't break the salt line." I looked down at the front threshold, where I'd swept away what I thought was old dust on my first day. It had been salt, a thick line of it, spanning the entire doorway, and I destroyed it. The house began to work on me, in earnest after that. Shadows in my peripheral vision would dart away when I turned to look. Not natural shadows, Shapes that moved against the light, that folded in on themselves in ways that made my eyes hurt. Lights didn't just flicker, they exploded, showering rooms in glass, leaving me in sudden darkness. My phone would die with a full battery, the screen going black for hours. When it finally turned back on, I'd have dozens of missed calls, all from my own number. The scratching started on the fourth night. A frantic, splintering sound at the windows and doors, like something trying to claw its way in. Fingernails on wood and glass. It went on until dawn, stopping exactly when the first light touched the horizon. I huddled in the master bedroom with a kitchen knife in my trembling hands, feeling a strange, invisible pressure pulling me toward the locked basement door, calling me down. I spent the next day in the study, devouring my grandmother's journals. The story they told was not of a quaint herbalist or folk healer. It was the story of a woman who had trafficked with darkness. My grandmother, Elara Blackwood, had made a deal, a pact with something ancient that slumbered beneath the land, something that had been here long before the trees, before the mountains pushed up from the earth, in exchange for her family's prosperity, for the money that had put my mother through college, that had bought our house, that had funded everything. Elara had become the thing's keeper. She had to perform regular rituals, bindings and feedings, to keep it contained within the property lines, to keep it satisfied. The symbols on the doors were wards. The salt lines were barriers. The covered mirrors were to stop it from finding a foothold in reflections. The last entry I found chilled me to the bone. October 7th, 2009. It is growing stronger. The old rituals are failing. I am preparing a final, permanent binding, one that requires an immense sacrifice, the greatest sacrifice. Tomorrow, I will. The entry cut off mid-sentence. The date was one day before her death. She had died before completing it. The journal explained the consequences in stark, terrifying terms. The entity, starved of its offerings for 15 years, would seek out the keeper's bloodline. It didn't just want a sacrifice. It wanted a new keeper. That night I knew I had to leave. I threw my bags into my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip my keys. I peeled out of the driveway, tires spitting gravel. The terror was a living thing in my chest, squeezing my lungs. I drove for what felt like hours. The GPS on my phone showed I'd gone 63 miles south. But when I took a sharp turn around a blind curve, the headlights illuminated a familiar peeling white facade. I was back in my grandmother's driveway. I tried again, different road. 45 minutes later, same house. The engine sputtered and died. Wouldn't restart, no matter how many times I turned the key. I was trapped. It chose that moment to show itself. Standing in the upstairs window, a figure, tall at least 7 feet, but bent wrong at the joints. Its limbs too long, elbows and knees bending in directions that would snap bone. Its head tilted at an angle that would kill a human. It watched me with eyes that had too many pupils, spiraling inward like a tunnel to somewhere I didn't want to comprehend. This wasn't a ghost. This was a landlord, and I was the trespasser. The following days became a blur of waking nightmares. I saw things, flashes of my grandmother's rituals, the smell of burnt offerings and sulfur choking the air, visions of her dragging things to a stone altar in the basement, her hands covered in blood, as she chanted in a language that made my teeth ache and my ears bleed. I was physically attacked. I woke up with long, deep scratches on my back. 3 parallel lines, like claw marks, that burned and wouldn't stop bleeding. One night, I was dragged from my bed by an invisible force, my bare feet scraping against the wooden floor, splinters digging into my skin as I clung to the doorframe, screaming. No one came. No one could hear me. Driven by desperation and terror, I started digging in the garden where the ground looked disturbed, where the grass grew in strange, perfect circles. I didn't find animals. I found bones, human bones, small ones, children. These weren't strangers. The journals had mentioned them. Previous generations who had failed the same test I was now facing. Blackwoods who had tried to break the pact and paid the price. My grandmother hadn't just been feeding it animals. I found the ritual components for the final binding in the attic, hidden in a locked trunk. A lock of her hair, brittle with age. A silver box containing dried herbs, and a shard of obsidian that seemed to absorb light. And a diagram showing where to place everything, in a circle around the stone altar in the basement. The final component listed was the Keeper's willing blood. It wasn't a sacrifice to destroy the entity. It was a sacrifice to chain myself to it, to take my grandmother's place for the rest of my life. Desperate for any answer, any way out, I grabbed the last journal. I had only read the beginning. Maybe there was something at the end, a forgotten clue, a loophole, something. I flipped through the pages, past the accounts of rituals and fear, past the entry that cut off before her death. But it wasn't the last entry. Tucked into the very back, on a page that was crisp and new, was another entry. The ink was deep, glossy black, impossibly fresh. My blood ran cold. The script was a perfect imitation of my grandmother's handwriting. October 23rd, 2024. Sarah has arrived. The blood calls to blood. The land has been hungry for so long. Soon she will understand. Soon she will choose. They always choose. I looked at the date. It was dated 3 days ago. 3 days ago? My grandmother had been dead for 15 years. That's when I understood. I wasn't alone in this house. I'd never been alone in this house. My grandmother hadn't just failed a ritual. The entity had taken her, consumed her, and learned from her. It had used her memories to forge documents, to hire the lawyer who'd never existed, to create the perfect bait. The inheritance was a trap that had been set for 15 years. And the thing writing in her journal had been waiting for me to read it, watching me the whole time. The house groaned around me. A sound of deep, malevolent satisfaction. I'm telling you this from a motel, 3 states away. Or at least, I think I am. The neon sign outside says Riverside Inn. But I don't remember checking in, don't remember how I got out of that house. I just remember fire, the smell of gasoline, and the hungry orange light consuming that rotting house, turning it into a beacon of my screaming terror. I remember running until my lungs burned and the sun came up. But I don't think I escaped. Sometimes I see my grandmother in the mirror behind me, her face pale, her eyes filled with too many pupils spiraling inward. Sometimes I wake up in a room that looks like mine, but the doors are in the wrong places. And when I look outside, I see trees that shouldn't be there. Trees that crowd too close. The curse wasn't in the land. It was in the blood. My blood. Last week, I got a letter from a lawyer I've never heard of, addressed to my younger cousin Emma. She's just turned 21. The letter explains that she's inherited property from a distant relative, the Blackwood estate. I tried to call her, tried to warn her, but my phone only dials one number now. My own. And when I answer, I hear myself speaking. But it's not my voice, not really. It's my grandmother's voice, wearing my words like a coat. If someone leaves you an inheritance and your family warns you away, they're not being cruel. They're not being superstitious. They're trying to save your life. Because We inherit more than property and money. We inherit debts we didn't make and battles we didn't start. We inherit hunger that can never be satisfied and darkness that knows our names. And some family legacies are written in blood that never, ever dries. The land is still hungry, and it's always looking for new keepers. Life is messy. It doesn't make any sense. That's what my grandmother used to say before she disappeared into the woods behind our property in rural Vermont. Before they found the pieces. My name is David Chen. I'm a contractor, or I was. I specialized in restoration work. Old buildings. Historic properties. The kind of places where every piece has to fit perfectly, where the whole structure falls apart. 3 months ago, I took a job that changed everything I thought I knew about patterns. About chaos. About the way the universe puts things together. Because some puzzles shouldn't be completed. And some pictures were never meant to be seen. It started with a simple quote request. Email from a woman named Margaret Thorne. She owned a property called Mervish Village, an old commune from the 70s that had been abandoned for decades. I need someone who understands restoration, her email said. Someone who can see how pieces fit together, how to make something whole again. The pay was good, suspiciously good. $28,000 for what should have been a $10,000 job. But I needed the work. My daughter's medical bills were piling up. My wife had left 6 months earlier. Couldn't handle the stress anymore. So I drove out to Mervish Village on a cold October morning and found something that shouldn't exist. The property sat in a clearing surrounded by dense forest. 12 buildings arranged in a perfect circle around a central structure. All of them painted in faded earth tones, browns, deep reds, yellows like dried corn. But it was the central building that made my skin crawl. It was octagonal. 8 sides, 8 walls, and every single surface was covered in geometric patterns. Spirals and symbols that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. Margaret met me at the gate. She was ancient. Maybe 80, maybe older, but her eyes were sharp. Too sharp. "Mr. Chen," she said, not offering her hand. "You came alone. Good. The work requires focus, singular focus. What exactly needs restoring?" I asked, looking around. The building seemed structurally sound, just weathered. "Not restoration," she corrected. "Completion. The village was never finished. The final pieces were never put in place. And now the pattern demands completion." The way she said pattern made it sound like a living thing. Something with wants, with needs. She showed me the central building first. Inside, the walls were covered floor to ceiling with what looked like puzzle pieces. Actual wooden pieces, each one carved with intricate designs, fitted together to form larger patterns. But sections were missing. Gaps in the design where pieces should have been. "The original builders," Margaret said, running her fingers over the gaps. "They believed that reality itself was a puzzle. That if you could see the complete pattern, if you could understand how all the pieces fit together, you could control it, reshape it." That's insane," I said. She smiled. "Is it? You're a contractor, Mr. Chen. When you look at a blueprint, don't you see how every piece connects? How removing one support beam collapses the entire structure? They simply applied that principle to everything." She handed me a folder. Inside were designs. Blueprints for the missing pieces. Exact specifications, down to the millimeter. "Your job," she said, "is to create these pieces. Fit them into place. Complete the pattern. Simple restoration work." I should have walked away. Should have gotten in my truck and driven back to civilization. But I needed the money. And there was something about those patterns. Something that pulled at me. made me want to see them complete. I started work the next day, set up my workshop in one of the outer buildings. The wood Margaret provided was strange, dark and heavy, with grain patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like they were carved rather than grown. The first piece took me 6 hours. Every measurement had to be perfect, every angle precise. When I finally fitted it into place on the wall, something happened. The pattern around it shifted, just slightly, like the other pieces were adjusting to accommodate the new addition. Beautiful, isn't it? Margaret appeared behind me, making me jump. The pattern recognizing completion, one piece closer to the whole. Over the next 2 weeks, I created 17 more pieces. And with each one I added, something changed in the village. The buildings seemed to align more perfectly. The paths between them appeared straighter. Even the trees around the clearing began growing in more organized patterns. And I started having dreams. In the dreams, I saw the original builders. 23 of them, living in Mervish village in the early 70s. They weren't hippies looking for peace and love. They were mathematicians, physicists, philosophers, all of them obsessed with the same question. If reality is chaotic, random, meaningless, what happens when you impose perfect order on it? They started with small experiments, arranging stones in geometric patterns, planting gardens in precise spirals, building structures with mathematical perfection. And they discovered something. The patterns had power. They could influence probability, bend chance, make unlikely things happen more often. So, they went bigger, built the village as one massive pattern, a puzzle that, when completed, would let them control randomness itself, choose their own outcomes, write their own fates. But they made a mistake. They completed the pattern before they understood what it would do, and it showed them something. Something about the true nature of reality. Something so perfect, so absolutely ordered, that their minds couldn't handle it. 14 of them died instantly. Just dropped, dead, eyes wide, mouths frozen in expressions of pure terror. The remaining 9 tore the pattern apart, removed key pieces, scattered them into the forest, vowed never to complete it again. But Margaret was one of the 9, and she'd spent 50 years searching for the missing pieces, recreating them, waiting for the right person to put them back. Someone who understood patterns, who craved order, who needed things to make sense. Someone like me. I realized too late what I'd done. By the time I'd placed the 32nd piece, the pattern was nearly complete. Only one gap remained, and I could feel it pulling at me. The pattern itself, reaching out through my mind, showing me things. I saw every choice I'd ever made, every random event in my life, and I saw how they all connected. How my grandmother's disappearance had led to my mother's anxiety. How her anxiety had made me crave control. How that need for control had pushed me into restoration work. How restoration work had brought me here. It wasn't random. It had never been random. Every piece of my life had been carefully arranged to bring me to this exact moment. The pattern had been using me all along. Margaret found me on my knees in the central building, staring at the walls. "You see it now, don't you?" she said softly. "How everything fits, how every piece has its place, how beautiful perfect order truly is." "The last piece," I whispered. "What happens when I place the last piece?" "Completion. The pattern becomes whole, and reality adjusts to match it. No more chaos. No more randomness. Everything in its perfect place. Everyone playing their assigned role. And if I don't place it," her smile faded, "then the pattern remains incomplete. And incomplete patterns, they hunger, they reach out, pulling in whatever they can find. consuming pieces that don't quite fit, trying to complete themselves by force. She gestured to the forest. Your grandmother, the others who've come here over the years, the pattern took them, used them, ground them down into pieces that might fit, but they weren't right. The angles were wrong. The grain didn't match. But I'm right. You're perfect. Your entire life has been shaped to create someone who could see the pattern, understand it, complete it willingly. I spent 3 days carving the final piece. Every measurement perfect. Every angle exact. The wood felt warm in my hands. Alive, like it was eager to find its place. On the 4th day, Margaret watched as I climbed the ladder in the central building. The gap waited. One piece. One choice. One moment that would determine everything. I held the piece up to the gap. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. It had been designed to fit. Destined to fit. And in that moment, I understood what my grandmother had been trying to tell me all those years ago. Life is messy. It doesn't make sense. Everything's random. But when you complete a puzzle, when you finish it, you've made all the right choices. No matter how many wrong pieces you tried to fit in wrong places. At the very end, everything makes one perfect picture. And sometimes perfect pictures are the most terrifying things in the world. I didn't place the piece. I threw it into the wood stove in my workshop and watched it burn. Then I took a hammer to the walls, smashed every piece I'd created, destroyed 17 pieces that had taken me weeks to make. Margaret screamed. Actually screamed. Like I was killing something she loved. You don't understand, she shrieked. The pattern is mercy. It's purpose. Without it, we're just random events colliding in the dark. We're meaningless. Maybe, I said, still swinging the hammer. But at least we're free. The pattern fought back. The pieces I destroyed left gaps that seemed to bleed. The walls groaned. The building shook. For a moment, I thought the whole structure would collapse. But then, silence. The pattern was incomplete again. Broken. Powerless. Margaret collapsed, suddenly looking every one of her 80+ years. It will try again, she whispered. It will always try again. The hunger for completion never ends. I left Mervish Village that night. Never collected payment. Never looked back. But Margaret was right. The pattern is still out there. Still incomplete. Still hungry. I see evidence of it everywhere now. In the way coincidences pile up too neatly. In the way people's lives seem scripted. In the way random events sometimes align too perfectly to be chance. The pattern is trying to complete itself. Piece by piece. Person by person. Pulling all of us into positions where we fit into some grand design we can't see. And the terrifying thing? Most people want it. They want to believe their lives have meaning. That everything happens for a reason. That all the chaos and pain and randomness is actually part of some beautiful, perfect picture. They don't realize that perfect pictures have no room for choice, for change, for growth. They don't understand that the mess, the chaos, the randomness, that's freedom. Remember this, when life feels too perfect, when coincidences align too neatly, when you start to see patterns in everything, that's when you should run. Because some puzzles complete themselves. Some patterns pull you in whether you want them to or not. And once you're a piece in someone else's design, once you fit perfectly into place, you can never be taken out again. We spend our lives trying to make sense of chaos, trying to find patterns where none exist, trying to force meaning onto random events. But true wisdom isn't finding the pattern. It's accepting the mess, because control is an illusion. Perfect order is a prison, And the most dangerous thing in the world is someone who promises to make everything make sense. Life is messy. It doesn't make sense. Everything's random. And that's exactly how it should be. Stay messy. Stay free. Stay incomplete. We spend our lives seeking peace, quieting our minds, letting go of who we were. But identity isn't a burden to release. It's the only thing keeping you human. When you lose your past, your memories, your face, you don't find peace. You find oblivion. And oblivion is patient. It waits on dark roads, in tunnels, in the spaces between breaths. It wears the faces of those who couldn't outrun their own fear. I was looking for peace when I found the road. Now, I can't remember what my face looks like. My name is Leo. Or at least, I think it still is. I was 24 years old, driving through rural Pennsylvania, in the middle of a breakdown. Not the car kind, the life kind. My girlfriend Sarah had left me 3 days earlier. Screaming match. Slammed door, blocked number. The whole cliché. My job at the marketing firm was suffocating me. My apartment felt like a cage. I needed to get away, to clear my head, to find some kind of peace. That's what the meditation app on my phone kept telling me. Find your center, be present, let go of the past and future. Easy to say. Impossible to do when your mind won't stop screaming. So, I drove. No destination. Just away. That's how I ended up on State Route 351 at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late October. The road that locals call the Green Man's Road. The gas station attendant had warned me. Old guy, maybe 70, with eyes that had seen too much. I'd stopped for coffee and directions, trying to find the fastest route back to the highway. You don't want to take Route 351, he said, leaning against the counter. Not at night. I laughed. Tired, bitter. Why? Bad road conditions? Bad. Something else. He pushed a paper map toward me, circling an alternate route with a shaky hand. There's a legend about a man who walks that stretch after midnight. They call him the Green Man. Charlie No-Face. He's looking for something. Looking for what? The old man's eyes went distant. The light that burned him. Or maybe he's looking for faces, new faces, to replace the one he lost. I thanked him, took the map, and completely ignored his advice. Because I was exhausted. Because the alternate route added 40 minutes. Because I didn't believe in ghost stories. I should have listened. My car died at 11:58 p.m. One moment, the engine hummed its monotonous lullaby. The next, silence. Complete. Suffocating. Silence. The headlights flickered once, then held. Barely. Casting weak beams into fog that had appeared out of nowhere. I was parked just before the mouth of an old railroad tunnel. A black void that seemed to swallow light whole. Come on, I muttered, turning the key. Click. Nothing. Again. Click. I slammed my palm against the steering wheel. The sound echoed, too loud, like the car was hollow inside. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course. That's when the present moment stopped feeling peaceful. The meditation app had said, when you focus completely on the now, anxiety disappears. There is no past. No future. Only this breath, this moment. But they never mentioned what happens when this moment becomes a nightmare you can't escape from. I sat there, breathing, present, terrified. And that's when I heard it. Tap. Soft. Wet. Against the rear of the car. Just a branch, I told myself. A pine cone falling. Tap, tap, tap. This time on the driver's side window. Right next to my head. Not sharp like wood. Dull. Fleshy. Like knuckles with no skin. I pressed myself against the passenger seat, staring at my reflection in the dark glass. "Hello?" My voice came out thin, shaky. "Is someone there?" The wind whistled through the tunnel ahead. Low, mournful, nothing else. I locked the doors. Both of them. The solid clunk should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Because then I heard breathing. Ragged. Labored. Like air being forced through damaged lungs. Wheeze. Wheeze. It came from everywhere and nowhere. Echoing from the tunnel. Pressing against the windows. The sound was filled with pain. Decades of pain. Centuries of it. I squeezed my eyes shut. "Be present," I whispered. "Focus on your breath. Let go of fear." But the meditation techniques that worked in my quiet apartment, surrounded by candles and ambient music, they meant nothing here. Because some moments you're supposed to run from. When I opened my eyes, I saw the graffiti. The headlights illuminated the tunnel entrance. Crude spray paint dripped down the concrete. He walks. No face, no soul. And below it, in shaky letters, "Don't look." My stomach dropped. Then I saw the handprint, pressed into the damp soil near the tunnel. Glowing. A faint, sickly green luminescence pulsing from the impression. The hand that made it wasn't right. The fingers too long. The palm too wide. I stumbled out of the car before I could think. Before fear could stop me. The cold air hit like a punch. It smelled wrong. Burnt wires. Ozone. Decay. I needed to get signal. To call someone. Anyone. One bar flickered on my phone screen. That's when I noticed the handprint on my driver's side window. The same glowing green. Smeared across the glass from outside. I hadn't seen it from inside the car. Because it had just appeared. The breathing started again. Closer now. Right behind me. Wheeze. I spun around. Nothing. Just fog. Just darkness. Just the skeletal trees pressing in from all sides. Then, a whisper. Dry. Rustling. Like dead leaves. Cold. The words slithered into my ears. Into my brain. I ran back to the car. Threw myself inside. Locked the doors. Turned the key. Click. Nothing. The breathing was at my window now. I could feel vibrations through the glass. "Be present," I whispered frantically. "Be in the moment. Let go. You wanted peace." The voice came from everywhere. From inside my own head. Peace means stillness. I looked at the passenger side mirror. A figure stood on the yellow line behind my car. Tall, stooped, wrapped in ragged clothes that seemed to merge with the fog. Where its face should have been, nothing. Just a blank expanse of skin that glowed faintly green. No eyes. No nose. No mouth. Just absence. I don't remember getting out of the car. But suddenly I was running. Down the center of the road. Lungs burning. Legs pumping. The fog swallowed me whole. I ran for what felt like miles. The trees on either side never changed. The road never curved. Just straight. Endless. Eternal. When I finally stopped, gasping, I looked back. The road behind me was empty. My car was gone. The tunnel was gone. Just fog and asphalt stretching into nothing. Relief flooded through me. It was over. I'd escaped. I'd finally found the present moment. Alone. Safe. That's when I looked down at the puddle near my feet. My reflection stared back at me. But it wasn't my face. The features were softening, blurring, like wet clay being smoothed by invisible hands. My jawline was disappearing, my nose sinking, my mouth stretching into a featureless smear. And my skin, it was glowing, that same sickly green. I touched my cheek, It felt cold, malleable, wrong. I tried to scream, but the sound came out muffled, wet, a noise without lips to shape it. The entity wasn't chasing me. It never was. It was a contagion, a story, a legend that gets inside you and remakes you from within. By running, by believing, by feeling that perfect, exquisite terror, I had given it a new host. My memories started flickering. Sarah's face, my apartment, my mother's voice, my name, all of it fading like old photographs left in the sun, being replaced by something else, something cold and singular, a purpose, to walk this road, to wait for the next car, the next person looking for peace in all the wrong places. The meditation app had been right about one thing. When you're truly present, the past disappears. The future disappears. There's only now. But they never warned me. That now could last forever. They found my car at dawn. 2 state troopers. The older one, a local named Gable, had seen this before. Cars abandoned on Route 351. Doors open. Keys in the ignition. No driver. Probably went for help, the younger trooper suggested. But there were no footprints leading away. Just to the car. Then, nothing. Gable stared down the empty road. In the distance, barely visible through the morning mist, a figure was walking. Tall, slow, purposeful. It moved with a stride that seemed younger than the legends described. Almost energetic. Gable turned away. He'd learned long ago not to look too closely. Legends don't die. They just find new faces. New people to wear. New stories to tell. I walk the road now. Every night. Waiting. I can't remember my name anymore. Can't remember what I looked like. Can't remember anything except the cold and the search for warmth. For light. For the thing that burned me. Sometimes I see cars. Headlights cutting through the fog. Sometimes they stop. Engine trouble. Bad luck. Fate. And I walk toward them. Slowly. Breathing that labored breath. Waiting for the fear to bloom in their eyes. Because fear is how the story spreads. How the legend finds new carriers. The people who scoff at warnings. Who ignore the locals. Who think they're too rational. Too modern. Too smart to believe in ghosts. Those are the ones who become us. Last week, a woman stopped on the road. Car trouble. Phone dead. Alone in the dark. I stood outside her window. Breathing. Waiting. She saw my reflection in her mirror and ran. Good. Run while you still have a face. Run while you still remember your name. Because once you stop, once you let the present moment trap you completely, once you find the peace of having no past and no future, you'll become like me. A story. A warning. A thing without features. Walking an endless road. Searching for something you can't remember. Wearing the face you no longer have. Fear doesn't come from monsters in the dark. It comes from the moment you realize you've become one. When the thing you were running from was yourself all along. If you ever find yourself on Route 351 after midnight, don't stop. Don't look. Don't believe it's just a story. Because some legends are hungry. And they're always looking for new faces. I should know. I used to have one. I'm recording this from a psychiatric ward in Cleveland. But the words coming out of my mouth aren't mine anymore. My name is Emily Hartley. I'm 28 years old. I teach high school English in Millbrook, Ohio. 3 weeks ago, I woke up screaming in a language that shouldn't exist. And now I can't stop speaking it. Even when I try to use English, the old words force their way through. Like something buried deep is clawing its way to the surface. The doctors say my brain is being rewritten. The linguists say I'm speaking fragments of dead languages mixed with something older. Something that predates human civilization. But I know the truth. I've seen where these words come from. I've seen who's teaching them to me. And they're not done yet. It started on a Tuesday morning. Normal day. Grading papers, drinking coffee, planning my afternoon classes. I fell asleep at my desk around 6 a.m., just resting my eyes for a moment. When I woke up, my mouth was moving, speaking, but I couldn't understand what I was saying. The sounds coming out were wrong. Guttural. Ancient. Like my throat had been possessed by something that learned to speak when humans were still crawling out of caves. I tried to stop, tried to force English words, but my tongue moved on its own, forming syllables that hurt to pronounce. Sounds that made my teeth ache and my jaw crack. My roommate found me an hour later, still sitting at my desk, still speaking in that impossible language. She called 911, told them I was having a breakdown, a seizure, something. But when the paramedics arrived, they heard what I was saying, and they went pale. One of them crossed himself, the other one backed toward the door, because apparently I was speaking Latin, mixed with Arabic, mixed with something else, something neither of them recognized. And I was saying the same thing over and over. They hunger beneath. They call through the veil. The buried ones rise. They took me to Millbrook General. Ran every test imaginable. MRI, CT scan, blood work, neurological exams. The brain scan showed something impossible. My language centers, the parts of the brain that control speech, they were lit up like fireworks. Hyperactive. Like they were being rewritten in real time. Dr. Patterson, the neurologist, kept staring at the scans like they'd personally offended him. "I've never seen anything like this," he said. "It's like as if someone's teaching you a new language. But from the inside, your brain is creating neural pathways that shouldn't exist. Can you stop it?" I asked, or tried to ask. What came out was, "Null vox mortem, lingua perdita resurgit." Dr. Patterson stepped back. "What did you just say?" I didn't know. I never knew. The words just came. They brought in linguists. Professors from Case Western, a specialist in dead languages from Yale. Even a Catholic priest who specialized in exorcism, just in case. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the linguist, recorded everything I said for 3 days straight. Analyzed the patterns. Cross-reference with every known language database. On the 4th day, she came to my room. Her hands were shaking. "Emily, do you know about Ashbury Asylum?" I shook my head. "Never heard of it. It's about 15 miles from here. Abandoned since 1963. It was not a good place. Experimental treatments. Unethical research." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There was a doctor there. Dr. Silas Vaughn. He was obsessed with what he called the primal language of the soul." My skin went cold. I hadn't told anyone about the dreams. The ones where I saw an old man in a white coat, whispering to patients strapped to tables, teaching them sounds that shouldn't be spoken. Vaughn believed, Dr. Chen continued, that there was a language older than human civilization, a language that existed before we had mouths to speak it. He thought if he could unlock it, if he could teach people to speak it, he could communicate with what came before us. Before us. Before humans. Emily. He thought there were others. Beings that existed on this land before the first Native Americans. Before any recorded history. And he thought they were still here. Buried. Waiting. That night, I started scratching. I didn't realize I was doing it at first. Just felt an itch on my forearm, then my shoulder, then my stomach. When the nurses found me, I'd carved symbols into my skin, geometric patterns that looked like language, like writing from a civilization that never existed. Dr. Chen came immediately. She photographed the symbols. Then she went white as a sheet. "These are identical," she whispered. identical to carvings found at the Ashbury ruins. We thought they were just vandalism, graffiti from teenagers exploring the abandoned building. But they're not, I said. Or the voice using my mouth said. No, they're invocations. Summoning symbols. We found references to them in a 15th century grimoire about witchcraft, about calling things from beneath the earth. The symbols on my arms began to burn. Not painful, but warm, pulsing, like something was responding to them. The dreams got worse. Every night, I walked through Ashbury Asylum, down corridors lined with empty rooms, past operating theaters where Dr. Vaughn had conducted his experiments. And in every dream, I heard them. The patients, dozens of them, all speaking in that same impossible language, all saying the same things over and over. The buried ones hunger. They call through the veil. The tongue remembers what the mind forgets. I saw what Vaughn had done to them, how he'd used hypnosis, drugs, sensory deprivation, anything to break down their normal speech patterns, to make room for the old language. Most of them died. Their brains couldn't handle the rewiring. But a few learned to speak it fluently, and those patients vanished, just disappeared from their rooms one night, left behind only ash and those geometric symbols burned into the walls. Vaughn's final journal entry, dated October 23, 1962, said only, "They answered, 'They're coming through. God forgive me for opening the door.'" On my 7th night in the hospital, I sleepwalked. The security footage shows me walking out of my room at exactly 3 a.m., down the hallway, through the emergency exit, into the parking lot. I walked for 2 hours, barefoot, hospital gown flapping in the October wind, following some invisible path only I could see. They found me at dawn, standing in front of the Ashbury Asylum ruins. My feet were bloody. My lips were moving, still speaking that language. And behind me, written in the dirt in perfect geometric symbols, a message. Dr. Chen translated it later. The veil thins, the buried ones rise, the tongue speaks what was forbidden. After that, they moved me to this secure psychiatric facility. For my own safety, they said. But I know the truth. They're afraid of what I might do, what I might call up, because I'm not the only one anymore. There are others, across Ohio, across the Midwest, people waking up speaking this language, carving these symbols, sleepwalking to places where the earth is old and the ground is soft. A researcher named Dr. Marcus Webb contacted Dr. Chen. He's been studying the language for weeks, tracing its origins. He thinks he's found it. A proto-language, spoken by a tribe that lived here thousands of years before the mound builders, before any recorded Native American settlement. He calls them the buried people, because all we've ever found of them are mass graves. Thousands of bodies, buried in geometric patterns that match the symbols we're carving into our skin. And when Dr. Webb ran the language through a reversal algorithm, when he played the phonemes backwards, they formed coherent warnings in ancient Sumerian. Do not speak the old tongue. Do not call what sleeps beneath. The buried ones hunger. They will rise through those who speak. Yesterday, I stopped fighting it. The language, the symbols, the pull toward Ashbury. Because I realized something. This isn't possession. It's not some evil spirit taking over my body. It's memory. Genetic memory. Cellular memory. From a time before recorded history. My ancestors, our ancestors, they knew these beings, lived alongside them, maybe even worshipped them. And when those beings were buried, when they were sealed beneath the earth for whatever reason, they left a key. The language, the primal tongue, the sounds that vibrated a frequency that thins the barrier between our world and wherever they are. And every person who speaks it, every person whose brain gets rewritten to accommodate those ancient phonemes, we become antennas, receivers, doors. Dr. Chen came to see me this morning. She looked exhausted, terrified. There are 43 cases now, she said. All within a 100-mile radius of Ashbury, all of them speaking the same language, all of them sleepwalking toward the same place. The asylum, I said in English. It hurt to speak it now. English felt wrong. Primitive. Like trying to write with broken crayons after using a fountain pen. No, not the asylum. Beneath it, there's a cave system we didn't know existed. Ground-penetrating radar shows. Chambers. Massive chambers under the entire region. And inside them, she pulled up images on her tablet. Showed me the scans. Bodies. Thousands of them. Arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Some of them thousands of years old. Some of them recent. Patients from Ashbury, maybe. Or earlier test subjects from Vaughn's experiments. All of them with their mouths open. Frozen mid-scream. Or mid-speech. They're not dead, Dr. Chen whispered. The bodies, they're not decomposing. It's like they're waiting. I'm writing this now while I still can. While I can still force English words onto paper. Because tonight, I'm going to stop fighting. Tonight, I'm going to let the language take over completely. Let it rewrite every word in my brain. Every thought. Every memory. And then, I'm going to walk. Like the others are walking. Through streets and fields and forests. All of us converging on Ashbury. All of us speaking the same words. All of us calling down through the earth to what sleeps beneath. Because the buried ones are hungry. And we've been speaking the dinner bell. Dr. Chen found this recording on my bed this morning. Along with a note written in perfect geometric symbols. She's had it translated. It says, "The veil has torn. The buried ones wake. The tongue speaks what was always true. We were here first. We are here still. And we will speak again through every mouth that remembers the old sounds. Through every throat that vibrates with the frequency of the earth's deep bones. You cannot bury what refuses to die. You cannot silence what speaks through blood and bone and cellular memory. We are the forgotten. And we are remembering ourselves. If you're reading this, if you wake up one morning and find yourself speaking words you don't understand. If you find geometric symbols appearing in places you don't remember going. If you hear a voice beneath your own voice, teaching you sounds that hurt to pronounce, don't fight it. It's already too late. The language is a virus. And once it gets into your brain, once it starts rewriting those neural pathways, you're not speaking it. It's speaking you. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, in chambers that predate human civilization, something very old is listening. Learning our names. Learning our voices. Getting ready to rise. Remember this, some languages aren't meant to be spoken. Some words weren't meant to be remembered. Some sounds vibrate at frequencies that thin the walls between worlds. And some things that were buried weren't buried because they were dead. They were buried because speaking their name would wake them up. We're all speaking it now. Every single one of us carrying that language in our DNA. In our cellular memory. In the deep parts of our brains that remember things we shouldn't know. The buried ones are rising. And we're the ones calling them home.